Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Broom Brothers, the official podcast of the Grand Slam of Curling and the Curling Group. Thrilled to be here. John Cullen with you, as always. And, of course, my partner in crime didn't quite win the Brier, but did come second at the PEI Club Championships this past weekend. Robbie Doherty is here. And, Robbie, how are you coping in the aftermath of your big weekend?
Well, the A curling event in Canada didn't go our way, unfortunately, the PEI Club Provincials. But you know what? The future is bright for Team Yogi's, sponsored by Yogi's Food and Bar. And we're just going to keep trying every year and keep things going. But congratulations to Cornwall #1, our club mates who won the Provincials.
Wow.
And you know what, though? We had a few beers, a few laughs, a few beers, a few games, a few beers, and next year will be our year.
Love it.
It was fun. It was fun. But it's still fun to curl, man. It's just it's totally different. But
we love the game. Obviously, the Brier finishing up in Kelowna this past weekend. Team Brad Jacobs defeating Team Matt Dunstone in the final. Yep. And we will hear from two members of Team Brad Jacobs. This is our first ever dual interview pod, although we did do the International Women's Day special where I interviewed 4 people, but 2 from the same team we've never done before. We're going to hear from lead Ben Hebert and coach Paul Webster. Both were great chats, so look forward to that later in the episode. But Robbie, we'll just start right at the top here. Team Brad Jacobs winning the Brier. I believe they were my pick to win, and indeed they hoist the trophy. Your immediate thoughts on Team Jacobs winning the Brier?
Well, I think Dunstone was my pick.
Dunstone was your pick.
Yeah, so I knew we were going head to head, so I was a little bit competitive in that one going into it. But you know what? Here's my overall thoughts on the Brier. As I mentioned to you, when you live in the Atlantic time zone in our province, my neighboring provinces here, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland and Labrador, who are even more behind by a half an hour. It was tough to see all of it, to be totally honest. So I didn't get to watch as much as closely as I would have liked to. As I mentioned to you, I did see most of the night games, but a lot of times I'd wake myself up from a snore or something if I heard Vic Rauter's voice get loud and a big shot coming up. But I did get to rewatch it in the mornings. But it was great. It was a really cool Brier. My first comment, and I'm just going to get this out of the way, I don't know if Kelowna Tourism had a lot of money invested in this event and sponsorship, but man, Kelowna looks beautiful. And if not move there, I at least want to go visit there. So job well done.
Nice. Kelowna is nice. Yes.
On the ice, though, you know what? It was really impressive. It was a great week. It's no secret that the sport in general, in general around the world has certainly elevated in the past, 5 to 10 years on another level. This week was no different. And I thought it was, the first time in Canada that we really, not the first time, but it stood out more to me that we have really, really, really great teams here, and they showed it last week. We in the curling world, you hear so often about how the world used to be the world is catching up, and now it was the world is caught up, and now it's the world is passing, but you know what? The Scotties too. Like the curling was really, really good. Like precise. I just couldn't get over the skill, especially in the playoffs, obviously. And the other comment I want to say, John, and I'm sure we'll elaborate on this, is I noticed at the start of this season, a lot of the discussion within fans and chats and all that stuff is what's the future in Canada, going to look like after we see skips like Cooey, Gushu, Jacobs. I'm just using those names. I don't know when they're going to retire, but it's in the next.
Yeah,
exactly.
A lot of the skips are older. Like
There's a lot of
skips
fours
are in their late 30s or early 40s.
That's what I was going to say. There's a lot of 4s in their age now.
Yeah,
and there was almost a sense of worry of what's the future gonna look like. But this last week we saw Owen Purcell, who we talked about. We saw Sam Moybrook. We saw Kleider. Teams like that, young up and coming teams, really getting a taste of the big show. And there's some really talented teams out there. So I thought it was really reassuring to see not only the top teams excel and do what they do best, curl as precise as they did, make the big shots when they had to, but also seeing that next generation really nipping at their heels and giving the big dogs some runs for their money. And it was really entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I agree for sure. I think, you can include Team Epping in there. Obviously, John a little bit older, but the Horgan brothers both in their 20s still, and in Jake's case, early 20s. So bright futures ahead for both of them, and Ian McMillian as well. I don't know if you saw his name misspelled.
I did.
His jacket there, but yeah,
I did.
McMillian is kind of a sick last name, to be honest. So maybe they were doing him a favor there. But yeah, no, you're right for sure. I think it was you talk about the depth. You have a team like John Epping going 6-2 and missing the playoffs. And we can talk about that in a little bit, the format or whatever, but just that the level of play here, you're talking about Epping now being a top 10 team in the world, having a 6-2 record through the round robin, just phenomenal depth. You're right. And young depth. And I think it's just, hopefully we're going to do enough in the country to nurture those players and keep them playing. Because we have seen teams break through at the Brier and we think, okay, that they're the new savior. And then 2 years later, they're not curling anymore because they go, well, okay, making the Briers fun, but now what? I'd like to win if I could. That would be, or get myself in contention to win. So yeah, you're right for sure. I want to start with Jacobs and just their run. I thought they were very strong and very confident. And I think that was what was great to see for me is I think the last few years we have seen, it's been a little bit of the Brad Gushue show. It's like we have had teams obviously challenging them, but the stories of the last few Briers have kind of been the teams that end up falling short. We've seen Kevin Cooey have a couple not great Briers in a row. We saw Brendan Botcher, for all the promise of that team, never making it past the semifinals. And then we had kind of some surprise finalists the last 2 years, Matt Dunstone, Mike McEwen, kind of going on hot runs in 23 and 24, but then running into the brick wall that is Brad Gushue in the final. And so I thought what was interesting to me about this year is, in comparison to the last couple, is I think this is the first Brier in this quad, at least for me, where all the top dogs were doing what the top dogs were supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And maybe the only one you could make the case that didn't was Brad Gushue, just because the standard is set so high for him that losing the semifinal and losing it on a shot you'd expect him to make most of the time, that might be the only team where you'd go, well, they underperformed a little bit. But then again, if Brad makes that last shot, they're in the Brier final and maybe they win, and then who knows what happens. But Matt Dunstone didn't have a great Brier last year. After 23, he looked phenomenal this year, super confident. He was playing great. Jacobs, it felt like everything they wanted to do with this team was coming together. Reed looked revitalized, having BJ with him. Like you said, Owen Purcell goes on that hot run. Mike McEwen maybe stumbling a little bit, but again, it just came down to a couple shots. It wasn't like you wouldn't have watched them during the week and thought, oh, these guys are performing poorly. Kevin Cooey, coming off that disappointing Brier last year, they actually were quite good as well. I mean, they went 4-4, but played very well. If you watched any of their games, they were giving battles to everybody. So I think that was really the story of the Brier to me, was everybody was kind of doing what they were supposed to be doing. The teams were playing really, really well, and the Brier lived up to, the deep field that it had.
Yeah, and I think it kind of to add to my first point is, curling, like especially in Canada with these teams, like the precision was just mind blowing to watch. And I think you see a lot of comments on the internet or on Reddit, like things, those apps, and people I don't think understand how hard the Brier is to win. It's extremely hard to win. So like we talked about Gushue, they didn't even make the final. It was literally one shot. It was one shot.
Yeah.
And like that's shows you the level that it's at. You throw one a little bit heavy, it doesn't quite curl, you don't remove it, or you don't move the rock far enough, Brier's over. And then like you said, if they win and move on, and they win, you're looked at as a hero. It would have been what, 6 in a row or something. Mind blowing. Yeah. And then we talked about McEwen, stumbling. McEwen's team didn't play that bad.
No, definitely not.
It's not like they,
only one loss in the round robin.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it just shows you how much better you have to be than kind of your average good game at the Brier to go all the way. And I think it really just says something about the level of competition that was being displayed out there. Canada's in good hands, man. I going back to that comment about, the threat of the world teams passing and kind of leaving us in the dust. I mean, yes, like it's happened. Like Mowat and those teams are Retornez last year. They are unbelievable curling teams. But I just thought the Brier this year, it really showed that, Canadian teams are they're definitely still there. They're really good. And I do think to add to your very first point, Team Jacobs, they were your pick. They really looked from the 3-4 game on like they were going to win that event. It wasn't just how good they were playing. It was the timing of when they would make big shots. It was the way they were communicating. The look that Brad Jacobs had in his eyes, I wouldn't want to be on the other team that way. And
a little bit scary,
a little bit scary, but yeah, it was very entertaining. Heartbreaks for Matt Dunstone and the team, just to get, that hot and go on the run and then lose it in the final, especially when you have Hammer. But that team's on the upswing too. I think when they brought EJ in, it certainly brought a lot to that team. They have an extremely bright future, and that can light a fire under your ass pretty quick, and especially springtime before the Olympics and the Olympic trials. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, totally. Well, we're going to talk a lot about Team Jacobs in the interviews with Ben and Paul, so we can move on from talking about them because we're going to get all the insight from them. I thought both interviews were really great and really put some things in perspective about that team. But let's talk about Matt Dunstone because has a great run, goes undefeated in the playoffs leading up to the gets himself into the 1-2 game, wins that beats Brad Gushue twice. To get himself into that final, get the bye to the final. You talk about the confidence with EJ. Tell me a little bit more about what you saw from Team Dunstone over the course of the weekend.
I think I saw a solid lineup right through. Like you mentioned it, right from the get-go. They were there on a mission and they were dialed in right from the start. The level of play, I already talked about it for 10 minutes straight, pretty much, it feels like, but it was just such a high, intense level of play all week. And a lot of things were working well for that team. So I don't want to try to point out specific things, but the things that stood out to me was Matt truly had his game face on, maybe a little slip up in the eighth end. We're going to get into that later in the interviews. Strategically, and who am I to say that was a mistake? I'm a lead from PEI. You know what I mean? Like, but it was a strategic call, and it didn't pay off for them. But again, if it did pay off for them, maybe we're not talking about this.
Yeah.
But I thought Colton Lott really looked like he belonged as a top third at the Brier. As say a casual curling fan, it's really easy to see a younger person, maybe doesn't have the 12 bullet points on the resume for winnings, but that doesn't mean they can't play. And it's just, or they're not as good. Colton Lott, I thought, was dialed in. He made some huge shots at big times. And I think a lot of it too is going back to that EJ thing. When you bring in the Brush brothers, not the Broom brothers.
Yeah. Yes.
I was hoping.
And yes, we do pay them royalties. Everyone who's asking, we pay them royalties. So don't worry about it.
Listen, you have no idea how much I was hoping for just one Vic Router slip up where he says Broom Brothers instead of Brush Brothers. I might have even messaged Joanne and asked. Anyway, it didn't happen. But you put them in front of you, sweeping your rocks, and your confidence can't help but go up. It's just It's not even the strength. It's the chemistry. They're brothers. They're passionate. They've won the Olympics together, like sweeping rocks. And I think it showed. It was a great game. We're going to get into it again. I'm not going to bring it up, but yeah, there was a lot of zeros on the scoreboard, but there was rocks in play. It was skill. Yeah. Like it was just.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think, I talked about this on Twitter, but Matt is such a confidence player. And I think I talked about this on the last episode of Broom Brothers, the one we did the Brier preview before the International Women's Day special, which, by the way, if you haven't checked it out, that was a great chat with Jennifer Jones, Rachel Holman, Anna Hasselborg, and Jocelyn Peterman about being a woman in curling. And a lot of fascinating insights on that. So check it out if you haven't yet. But yeah, I think I said in the Brier preview too, like last year going into the Brier, and Matt sort of, he made the playoffs, but flamed out a little early. I think it was on Inside Curling or somewhere where he was just like, well, if I don't fix my outturn, we were not going to win the Brier. And he's saying this like 2 weeks before the Brier, well, my outturn is garbage. And I don't know if that was the exact quote, but it was
right.
One of the shot. Well, if I can't fix my outturn peels, we're going to lose. So whatever, like he's a very confidence based player. And you're right. Like he had the confidence right from the beginning. Like it just feels like this is the right lineup for them. And obviously, BJ is an unbelievable player. I mean, we see it this week, second spiel only with Reed, and they make the 3-4 game. He's clearly given that team new life.
Yes.
So it's not like, had to be a tough decision to get rid of BJ, one of the best. But yeah, the brushing of EJ and Ryan, I think just gives Matt the confidence he can make anything. Colton, you're right, played phenomenal. I think I said on Broom Brothers as well, or maybe in one of my newsletters, or I said, I think Colton will be one of the best thirds in the world. And I got a text from someone in the game during the Brier referencing me saying that. And they were saying, are you sure he's not there now? Are you sure that he hasn't, he's not already there? Because yeah, he was absolutely dynamite this week. Just looks so comfortable there because he hasn't been there long. He's been this whole great run they've had. He's been the second. And so, you're talking about replacing BJ, moving up the lineup. I thought he looked fantastic. And the whole team looked great. Obviously, disappointment. You can't help but feel for Matt. He's a guy who just wears his emotions on his sleeve and on his face, I guess. And that goes both ways, good and bad. And he's so exciting to watch because of that. So yeah, obviously you feel crushed for him, and I'm sure he's probably getting a little tired of hearing, well, you're going to win one. He's going to win one. It's like, okay, but I haven't, so shut up, But yeah, I really thought great week for them. I hope they take the right things away from it, and I'm sure they will with time. I'm sure it hurts right now. But yeah, let's get to the strategy because, this was obviously a talking point amongst people on Twitter, online, and just, I was getting texts during the final as well. Were you surprised to see them play that final so defensively? Because it seemed like they were very cautious about not wanting to flip the hammer early on in the game.
Well, it felt like they had a game plan, so I'm going to assume that the team talked about it.
Definitely, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they seem to be. I'm assuming they were all on board to do that. I mean, I'll say it again. I'm a lead from PEI. Who am I to go out and tell top 10 ranked curling team in the world what to do? But it felt like kind of to echo what you said a little while ago. If you get a team kind of just coming off of semifinals, you've been like I'd be more tempted to go right at them. I'd kind of, throw something up, see what happens. Maybe you'll get a roll out, you'll get a roll too far, or one slip behind the tee line. You have a chance to draw around a guard. Like, I guess what I'm saying is that I don't know if going balls out from the very first rock was the play, but maybe throw a corner up and just sort of see what happens, keep it around. And, you might get a miss here and there, and there's a 2. And, based on the final score, 2 would have been a pretty big. And I guess he did eventually get a deuce, but I was surprised. I was surprised to see it that defensive. But again, their team Dunstone. I'm co-host of the Broom Brothers, so I'm not going to say what they did was wrong.
For sure. I just think I think especially the 8th end was quite surprising. Team Jacobs puts their first rock in the house. Matt decides to hit it. I think this is in a tie game, and I think most people would think if you have the hammer in the 8th end in a tie game, you in theory have 2 hammers to the opponent's 1. I think a lot of people would have thought you'd throw a corner or even a delayed corner in that situation if you think the first rock is in too good of a spot or whatever the case. So I think that was really the only thing that was surprising, because I think most teams would be fine scoring 1 and 8. It would be like getting forced is not the end of the world. If you blank 8, you're putting so much pressure on yourself to also blank 9
or score 3
or score 2 or 3. Right. So you're, getting forced in 8 is way less bad than getting forced in 9.
Yes.
Which is what ended up happening to them. And so I think, that 8th end, you'd see most teams play a fairly aggressive strategy because they know that as long as you don't give up a steal, any result in 8 is pretty good for you. A blank is okay. You keep the hammer, and maybe you get a blank in 9 and you just keep the hammer to 10. 1 is okay too, because then if you force Jacobs in 9, now you have the hammer in a tie game in 10. Or even if you give up 2 in 9, you have the hammer down 1 in 10, which is the exact situation Brad Jacobs was in, and they won. So yeah, and then obviously if you get 2 or more in 8, your odds of winning the game will get into the 80s, maybe even the low 90s if you go up 2 in the 8th. So I think that was the only one where, I think playing defensive at the start, I agree. Like, yeah, I asked Ben about that in the interviews, but I, was maybe a little surprised knowing your team is coming off of the emotional semifinal. They only had about less than 2 hours to recover in between games. I might have been tempted to force the issue a little early, but even if you don't, and that's fine if you don't, I would say, yeah, I was a little shocked that, they played the 8th so conservatively. Obviously, as you said, it was probably a game plan, and something they had thought about doing ahead of time. But I do wonder if that's something they'll look at in the aftermath of all of this and say, maybe the next time we get in that scenario, we'll play it a little bit differently. Now, Robbie, before we move on from the Brier and get to these interviews, I want to give you a chance to give yourself a pat on the back here, because I'm sure we'll talk briefly about some of the other results, but maybe one of the most, not necessarily shocking, but one of the sort of one of the storyline results of the week was Brier rookie skip Owen Purcell making the playoffs. He was a guy that you had highlighted, had a must-win game against Sam Moybrook in the last game of the round robin. So essentially played a couple playoff games, because a must-win game is basically a playoff game. Tell me about Owen Purcell, your thoughts on him, and just other teams on the week. Any other thoughts you have? About
out of all of them, I would say I know Owen the least. He's younger than me, and Halifax is only 3.5 hours away. So I've seen those guys a lot. Luke Saunders and I are really good buddies, and Scott Zachary and I are pretty close buddies too. Luke and I kind of go way back. I spent a lot of time with Luke, and Luke was one of those guys who he got into curling quite late. He was a tennis player, very competitive tennis player. I think he played in Tennessee for a long time through college. But he's a gamer. He's a winner. He knows how to win. He's not intimidated by anybody. He was raised by Colleen Jones, arguably the toughest mindset in the history of the game, or one of them at least. And who was on the bench with them. So, that's a pretty winning lineup, and they can play. And there's a club in Halifax, the Halifax Curling Club, and they're doing a lot of things right now. And they're producing some really, really good teams. Totally. Teams that sort of play, not so much that, we heard it 10,000 times every nationals with the lazy handles. Like, they don't play like that. They play like real teams, like, good teams. So I think a lot of people have that in their mind that, they're from the Maritimes, they're going to struggle early. They're not going to be able to read the ice. They throw a half, 1.5 rotations as opposed to 3.5 or 4. But these guys, I knew this going into it, where a lot of the audience, maybe, Quebec and West, they just don't see them as much. But, I knew those guys would play. I knew how much experience there was. I knew how confident they were. I just knew they'd be really tough to deal with all week from, and maybe not so much the Gushues and the Jacobs and the Dunstones, but the Moybrooks and the Eppings and that kind of next tier down. I knew they'd be tough. I knew they'd be fearless. And I wasn't surprised at all to see them in the provincials. I was pretty proud of them. Luke and I spent a lot of time together when I went to the Mount in Halifax. It's a university. I was there for a year, and I house sat for my aunt. And I had one job. She was the family was in Florida. I had one job. Don't lose the cat. Anyway, Luke and I ordered pizza one night. The cat got out. I really hope my aunt doesn't listen to this. Anyway, we rescued Buffy. Buffy came right back, but Luke and I had a scare. I saw how tough he was in that moment. And it reminded me of that in Kelowna. So good job, boys. Colleen, favorite curler, favorite coach. Good job.
Yeah, no, they seemed, what I really liked about them is they seemed like they were having fun as well. It didn't seem like it got too complicated for them. Even when they started to get into the must-win game against Moybrook, the playoff game against Jacobs, they didn't look cowed by the moment, but they also didn't look like their lives were ruined, and maybe that's just the benefit of having, a rookie skip at the Brier or whatever. But I was really impressed with just their overall demeanor. I think they made a lot of fans this week, which I thought was excellent. The team I wanted to spotlight from the kind of the next group down is Reed. I think a lot of turmoil for Reed this last 365 days. I think he probably thought he had a pretty solid thing going with Brad Jacobs. Obviously he leaves for the opportunity with his team, and that paid off. They win the Brier, but obviously a huge blow for Reed. And then everything with Derek Samagalski also leaving the team, and having to bring in Kyle Deering, and then BJ becomes available, and then you have to have a tough conversation with Kyle. Hey, we brought you on the team, but you've kind of only played for like 2 tournaments, but also BJ's available. Can you be the 5th? Anybody who knows Kyle knows, he's one of the best guys in the game. So I'm sure that conversation maybe wasn't as tough as it might have been with someone else, but I'm sure it wasn't an easy conversation to have. Then you only play one tournament, the Manitoba Provincials, leading into the Brier. And I just thought Reed looked refreshed. It looked like, he just had a ton of confidence in what BJ was doing in front of him. I think getting to move Catlin down to second was also great. Catlin's a great thrower, but he's also a really good sweeper. So I think it gave him a nice sweeping pair. Connor Negevin, for being a smaller guy, is also a really great sweeper. I think all those things combined, you could have easily seen a week, and with Carruthers being in the more difficult pool too, you could have easily seen a week where they went 3-5 or even 2-6, and you wouldn't have been shocked. You would have said, well, it's been a crazy year for them. Yeah. And, that's too bad. They couldn't get it together in time. But quite the opposite, actually, find their way into the 3-4 game. Obviously a very tight battle with Brad Jacobs. They end up getting a steal of 2 in the 9th to make it a tie game. Very close, closer than it probably was on the scoreboard than it was in fact. But yeah, it was just nice to see Reed have his mojo back. I think curling is a better place when he's cooking, and it was nice to see BJ looked really refreshed as well, and looked like he was right in there with them. So that team is both interesting, because I think, great Brier, but now do they stay together? I think that's also the interesting thing. I would imagine the agreement with BJ didn't go past, well, let's just see if we can make the Brier and go from there.
100%.
And so I'll be interested to see where that goes. Does BJ stick around? Is there a fit for BJ with Kevin Cooey potentially? I don't know. That's no insider info. I'm not sure, but that'll be the curious thing to me to see, because I think it did work. I would like to see them stay together. I think it was it was a really nice mix for them. And it was really fun to watch. And just, you saw Reed get so pumped on some of those big shots he was making. And it was just fun to have that team cooking at the Brier, I think.
And to add to that, I actually noticed that too. I watched their tankard final, like their provincial final, and they looked confident in that game too. They were sharp. And I think BJ, I think you're bang on. I agree with everything you said there. BJ brought a lot to that team and kind of rounded it out, but it just looked like Reed had that look in his eye once again, that, he was confident, he was enjoying himself, and it was translating into wins. And Catlin made a few big shots too. That was another one.
Yeah,
the other thing I wanted to say too,
a little slow, and then he really picked it up. And towards the end of the weekend in the playoffs, he was very good.
Yeah, and Connor, you had mentioned he's just a physically smaller guy. Adam Casey had played a couple of years with Connor, and he was telling me that in the gym, and when they'd do some testing with the test brooms to see how much pressure they were getting, Connor's numbers apparently were just through the roof. So he's a really strong guy, and he certainly was very effective out there. He made a lot of shots for the team, with his brush.
Yeah, it was an all-star, second team all-star lead, I believe.
Yeah, well deserved. So hats off. Great week to Team Carruthers.
Yeah, great week for them. Great week for Team Purcell. There's way more we could talk about with the Brier, but our interviews are jam-packed. We don't want you to miss any of those. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Maybe we'll still be talking about Brier fallout by then, but hopefully that's enough of a recap, because we do just very briefly want to touch on the next tournament. We're in the Season of Champions, Robbie. We can't keep up, but the Women's Worlds starting this weekend in South Korea. And the question is the same as it ever was, Robbie. Can anyone beat Rachel Homan?
No. Let's get to the interview. I'm just joking. Well, I mean, they're playing like Team Homan, and they were so sharp. Sharp's not even the word. Dominating at the Scotties. A lot of those European teams and not European, but teams from around the world participating in the Worlds were watching a lot of that Scotties, and they know what they're up against, and it's a tall order, and I think they're going to be really tough. Repeat.
Yeah, I feel bad for Team Lithuania. Their first World Women's Championship and their first game is against Rachel Homan. Hey, welcome. I don't know if the fans back in Vilnius will be going wild for the that's the capital of Lithuania, just in case our listeners don't know. But the fans in Vilnius may be in for a rude awakening with that first game against Rachel Homan. I was like, oh, geez, you couldn't give Lithuania one of the maybe slightly easier spaces on the bingo card, maybe a little Turkey matchup to start or something. But yeah.
When the pools came out for the Scotties, I remember looking at it and being because we knew who was going, Team DiCarlo, and they had their first Scotties last year. And your first time, it's a learning event, and we're saying the whole province was behind them, and really hoping they'd have a great week. And the pools came out Friday night, PEI versus Canada, and I was just like, oh, that's a tough draw. That's a tough draw. But
yeah, it was like my BC boys, first Brier for Cam DeYoung, and they started the Brier Manitoba Carruthers, Canada Guju, Manitoba Dunstone, Alberta Cooey, Northern Ontario Epping. Welcome to the Brier.
Yeah, enjoy. Cooey had a pretty tough one too.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they started with Dunstone, Epping, Carruthers, DeYoung. Then they got DeYoung, Latimer, then Guju. So, but yeah, they started Dunstone, Epping, Carruthers, lost all three of those, and you start 0-3. And as we found out, they literally were out after that third loss. They didn't know it at the time, but yeah, tough way to start. But yeah, I think the storyline remains the same for the World Women's. Rachel Homan, but her last game against international competition was against Anna Hasselborg at the Slam in Guelph, and she lost. So there are losses out there. Rachel also lost at the Worlds last year once, I believe, to Team Gim. But yeah, they will definitely be the favorite going into the Worlds. But as we've said, the world field is deep. Tirinzoni is there, Gim is there. Hasselborg is there. There's lots of great teams in the field. So we'll be paying close attention to that. We'll see how Rachel Homan does over the next couple of weeks. But without any further ado, let's get on to our two interviews with our Brier champions, Ben Hebert and Paul Webster. Ben is on deck first. Let's go right to it. All right, we are pleased to be joined by the newly minted Brier champion 5 times, baby, 5 times. Put him up. The Brier tankard in the background as we do this interview. Ben Hebert is here. Ben, obviously, congratulations on your big win. We're going to bring you in with the top 4. I'm going to ask you 4 quick questions in succession, and you're just going to give me the first answer that pops into your head, okay?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Who is a curler that you have never played with before that you would like to?
Mark Nichols.
Oh, nice. When I thought about that question, I was like, you've played with a lot of guys. So if you know that both sets of rocks are good, there's no issues with either set. What color are you taking?
Red.
Where's your favorite place to curl other than your hometown?
Victoria, BC.
Oh, the Bear Mountain Classic?
Yeah.
Nice. Love it. And how would your bitterest rival describe you?
Probably got to talk to Brad. I don't know. I don't know.
Ben, listen, John Cena just turned heel a week ago. He's been in the news, but his famous saying, "The champ is here." You did it. You won the Brier. How's it feel?
Yeah, it feels amazing. Like, it's funny. Like, I won my first one when I was 24 with the Bear. And I remember being like, wow, it's an amazing feeling. And, when you win, it creates this fire inside of you. Like, it's the only other way to really get that feeling back. If you've never had it, it's all good. You're like, well, this is as happy as I'm going to be. But then you get that one taste of it and you're like, it's really hard to get back there unless you actually get back there. And we are back, baby.
We are so back.
We are so back. So like, it doesn't change, getting older, getting younger. It don't matter. It's an amazing feeling. Doesn't change at all. This fifth one was just as good as my first one. And, to do it with the new guys and get Cupsy his second and win Brett's fifth. And and another one with Mark's embarrassing for Mark. He only had 3. So a bit embarrassing for him. So we need to get him to 4. So yeah,
Poor
I'm just
fella.
really proud of the guys. I'm so happy. I'm just as happy for my teammates as I am everything else, right? To do it with those guys is pretty special. And yeah, we're flying on cloud 9 today. We're going to come down probably tomorrow, but we're still flying a bit here.
That's perfect. We got you at the right time then. And this is actually nice. I didn't know that me never winning the Brier and actually never getting to the Brier was good for me. That was actually good for my health. I didn't realize.
It is good for you. You don't realize, but if you win one, like we won when we were young. So, I was 24, Mark was 25. If you don't win from that point on to the next,
right?
Failure, every year failure.
Well, and you probably feel like you're going to win 1 million. You win your first one when you're 24. You go, I'm going to win 10 of these things.
Totally. I mean, especially the way it was going and the way the sport was. It changed so much over the years, and it's so hard to win now that, I don't take any of these for granted. And I mean, I haven't for a lot of years after we started getting work there in the middle of my career, but it's pretty special to get back here and represent Canada again. And and the way it went down, we've been playing really good. So it's not like it's not a surprise. Like we were saying yesterday, I was with Brett last night. You're like, you go to those things prepared, and whether we were the favorite or not, we in our mind thought that we were the favorite, or if we played good, we had a really good chance to win. And then it doesn't really hit you until you actually win. You're like, holy smokes, we actually did it. But you go there expecting to win, and then when you win, you're in shock. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's crazy feeling. And like to do it with new players and see how they react and how special it is to them, that was awesome.
Well, I wanted to ask because, I watched your immediate post-game presser, and you did get quite emotional. And I think, people would sort of see from the outside, well, you've won 5 of these things and you've won bigger titles. You've won world championships and Olympic gold medals. What was it about this one in particular that kind of got you in your feels like right after the game?
I don't know. I don't know. I just, I feel it right now again for God. I get goosebumps right now, even just thinking about that. But I just think getting older, knowing that, I'm not going to be doing this forever, and, the back 9 of my career, and I don't know exactly when it's going to end, but I know it's not too far down the road here. And I just understand, I have a great perspective how hard it is to win these. And, and the way we won, got fortunate there in the semi, we got a big break, and then battled hard in the final, and have, it's not a open hit up 4 coming home where you're planning, and we're playing a great team without the hammer, and they were playing great, and it was a 50-50 game. I mean, those are the games you want to be involved in, but I've been in a lot of those that go the other way. And so taking that break, and then I just letting out some emotion and just kind of how I was feeling. I having my family there, my kids, that was the big one for me, probably, that sent me over the edge a little bit. Like they were young when we were winning a lot, or not born,
Yeah.
So,
having them there and them understand it and get to watch, that was the most special for me for sure.
Ben, I want to jump in. I interviewed you on the Sportsnet broadcast in Nisku before a game, and it was early in the season, and I kind of asked you about the new skip and that sort of thing and how it was all working out. And you specifically told me that we're certainly not where we want to be yet, but we know it's a process and we know it's going to take time. 2-part question. Are you where you think you want to be now? And did it happen faster than you anticipated?
Well, I'm the least patient guy on our team by a mile, so that's for sure. So I was probably a quote that Mark or Brett or Paul told me to say that I actually told you that, because that's not really what I think. That's like one of those, I'm like, we need to win now. We're good enough to win now, but
right.
It is a process. I mean, there's a lot of things we learned a lot, even our last 2 slam finals against Bruce and Ross. We played well. We could have easily won both of those games. but probably losing those made us go back to the drawing board and look at a couple things that we were doing. And we put in a lot of work prior to the Brier with Murdoch, with Webby, just going over some things, situational things we wanted to work on. And yeah, we're right where we want to be now. We played amazing. I know, there was certain breaks we got to win, but there was a lot of times that those breaks shouldn't even have been there. Like we felt very confident that if we went to the Brier and played our best game, we were going to win. And you get out there and things happen, other teams play great. But I think that the learning curve of losing those 2 slam finals, as much as they hurt, really helped us in the Brier. I don't think I've ever been so calm in the 10th when we needed to deuce, even that last shot. Brett's like, just be patient and, take a deep breath. I'm like, buddy, this is about as calm as I could ever imagine myself being. So I felt very prepared, very confident in my teammates, total just like Zen mode that we were good to go to do this. I actually felt I've been super nervous. I'm in the most nervous I ever was in my life, was sweeping a draw to the button at the Casino Rama Skins game against Murdoch on the worst ice of all time. I was sweeping for the Bear, me and Mark, and we put it like this far from the pin. And it was hard to hit the rings. But I remember just like so nervous sweeping that rock. And I remember Brad's last one. It wasn't that hard of a shot. We had to draw the nail. But even if we did, I just felt like calm and collected and that we were going to do it because we had put all the work in prior and we were super prepared. So that's how I kind of felt on that last shot for sure.
Can you give us a little insight as to what some of those tweaks were? As far, you say you lost the slam final to Bruce and Ross, you get back in the lab a little bit. Can you give us some insight on what those things were?
Nothing really technical or shot making wise. Some sweeping stuff for myself. We just went over some gameplay, some strategy stuff that we wanted to work on that we thought was going to benefit us rather than going with like the traditional playbook of maybe what other teams did. We were trying to just kind of make our own. And like you say, you talk about a process and coming from different teams, like, we had Brad's strategy, we had, Brendan's strategy, Mark, and then there was a little bit of, Brett from what the Goo used to do. So, we just kind of tried to make our own for the new team Jacobs. And that was probably the biggest thing that benefited us, I think, that week. We had a plan, which was good.
You talked about not winning it in quite a while. I did some reading on some research on you in your career, and I think your first Brier win was 2008, correct?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, and this sparked this question about the slam finals. 2008 world curling looked a lot different than it does now, just with the development of teams around the world, like countries like Italy and so on. So if you would have said in 2008 that they're going to be, extremely tough at the World Championships, probably would have got a different answer than you'd get now. How does that change your team's training in getting ready for the World Championships?
Well, yeah. When we won with the Bear in 2008, it was like, okay, what kind of suits are we going to get for the banquet? What kind of pictures are we going to take with the gold medal? That year, I can't even remember we beat Dave Murdoch.
Yeah.
But he had someone else playing third. He didn't even have you and McDonald playing third. You guys probably remember. I don't remember.
Was that in Grand Forks?
Yeah, North Dakota. And I'm trying to remember who else was even in that world, like Ralph Stockley, maybe. I think we lost the China.
I'm looking it up right now. You got Graham Connell was third for Dave Murdoch. And then that
was a bad matchup against Johnny Moe. It was a real bad.
And then as far as like other teams, you got Ulsrud in here. Andy Kapp. Claudio Pescia was the skip of Switzerland, but he had Herleman throwing third. But yeah, like even Sweden that year was not very strong. Anders Kraup was the skip for Sweden that year. So you got France in here. You've got Czech Republic in here. Australia's in here.
Yeah. So that's how long I've been playing. And so our prep going into that, me and Johnny probably looked at the list and then we went, okay, we're going out this night. We're going out this night. We're for sure going out this night. We might
karaoke
take this night off and get ready for the semis. But that was just kind of the way it was. And then this year, yeah, we had a lot of fun on Sunday night. Me and Brett had a little fun last night. And as soon as we're off this call, I'm going to the gym, boys. I'm getting back at it here. So we're going to get right back at it. Probably back throwing rocks Thursday. Need a couple of days off just to kind of get the body feeling better. And then, we got the guys coming into Calgary twice before we head to the Jaw. And so we'll be getting ready. We know that like to go there and win a medal is a really good accomplishment. Any color medal. You know, there's six teams there in my mind, I think, that could truthfully win. So, you know, you got to make that top 6, get into the playoffs, and then you got to get hot for the playoffs like anything else. It's like winning a slam. It's very, very difficult. So yeah, we know the task at hand is not easy, and you know, winning the Brier doesn't guarantee a medal anymore by any stretch. So we're going to be working hard, and we're going to try to do our best to be prepared.
Love it. I want to go back to the Brier. You know, that is the topic at hand here, and I think people have kind of talked about the Brier format ad nauseum. We don't need to get super into it, but I did want to ask, you know, you guys go undefeated through the round robin, then you lose one game, and now all of a sudden you got to win 4 in a row to win it. That's maybe the only part of the Brier that doesn't seem appropriate to me at the moment.
We talked about it a little bit afterwards, and I just don't know how to fix it. I just don't have a solution. So right. Curling Canada's doing their best to keep the tradition of the game. I love the Brier. I love the provinces in the Brier. I was never even a real big fan of wild card names and the shitty jerseys. I love what they're doing, Nolan's doing to kind of keep it Canadiana. You know, I'm a big traditionalist. Like you say, I went to the Brier in 2005 with the pace setters boys. So I do love that that's why the Brier is amazing. That's why it's sold out. That's why it's the best event. It's the best event in our country. So I don't want to lose that. But at the same time, if you don't want to lose that, you're going to have give and takes. And if it's a shittier format or if there's a bad crossover, if I had a solution, I'd love to give one. I know there's a lot of opinions. I know they talk about relegation here and there. The relegation can only go so far too. Like what is taking 2 or 3 teams out going to do? You're not having a round robin. So unless you're going to actually make it proper where it's a real round robin with and then you're booting real good teams out again. And now there's only 3 good teams instead of 6 or 7. I actually think they're doing the best as they can right now. And if this is the format they're going to continue to keep, I mean, hey, they tried it a couple of years ago with like that championship pool. And then there was a weird 2 versus 3 game that if you were 7-1 and lost, you were out. I think it's the best format they've found in a few years.
I like the format too. It's just for me, it's you got to win 4 in a row, and the semi and the final are on the same day, which
I hate that. So I hate that. I thought it was a big advantage for us Saturday morning to play the Goo after he lost or Sunday morning after he lost late on Saturday night. That's a big disadvantage for him. We're rested all day watching that game, feet up. And then it was a big disadvantage for us having to go back on the ice 2 hours later to play Matt for a Canadian championship. So they do need to probably fix that. But as far as the format goes, I think they're doing a really good job. I don't have any complaints at all. I usually have a lot of complaints. I have 0 complaints. 0.
How has it changed though? Like for fans who have never played in a Brier, never played in a big event. Like in the old days, you said you played everybody once, you got to the playoffs, you played them again. Now you only play half the teams. But you do have the chance to sit back, watch some games because you know pools are on different times, obviously. How has it changed in terms of getting ready for the playoffs? Like, for example, playing Gushu or playing Dunstone in that first matchup or the semifinal. Just talk about the differences in how you prepare.
Well, the biggest difference is, honestly, you don't even see the other teams. Like, you don't even visually see them. Like, I remember getting to the game where we played Brad? Reed's team was in there. I think they were practicing getting ready for that night game. Because I think, anyways, we were like, oh, you guys are in this spiel. And we were like, I didn't see anyone from the other teams from Friday to Thursday. Like, you're not in the dressing room at the same time. It's like your pool, their pool. You only see them on TV. That's kind of the weird thing. Then you get to the playoffs, you're like, oh, you guys are in this spiel too. That's kind of the only weird thing. Outside of that, it doesn't change too much. We're watching them. We can watch 1 or 2 games, and you know the teams that are playing good. And you know the players that are playing good and where they're struggling and where they're not. And it's easy to see. So I wasn't too fussed about who we were playing. When we had to play Brad and Matt, I didn't go there thinking we were winning without playing Brad or Matt, if you were wondering. So I was pretty certain we were right where we were supposed to be.
Yeah. This Brier was interesting because, and particularly the playoffs, like you talk about knowing you're going to play Brad, knowing you're going to play Matt, probably. This was a weird Brier in that it felt like the playoffs, there was this sort of overarching rivalry story in basically every game, right? Like you guys obviously parted ways with Brendan. Brad parted ways with Reed. Brett used to play with Brad Gujut. Like, is that stuff even going through your mind in the playoffs or in the Brier? Like, was that additional motivation or anything, or is it all just kind of you're past all of that now?
It's funny, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I've thought about it lots. I mean, during that process of, moving on from a teammate or a player and, a friend, it's brutal. You don't like that. I mean, I'm sure it's like that for all those guys. I mean, even, we played Reed in the 3-4 game. Like, that's the team Brad left to come to us. Like, well, can't really lose this one. That'd be embarrassing. There's a lot of things out there, and, Brad had to play his cousins in the final. And playing the Goo one rivalry. It's not like we're not like we're besties. And Brett being with us and Brad winning the last two after Brett left. I mean, there's just a lot of shit. And I have thought about it, going in and stuff. Like, I'd like to beat that for this or this for that. But man, when you're out there, it sounds super clear. I don't even think about it for 1 second. And then afterwards, not a spiteful. I'm not a jealous guy or a spiteful guy. Like, I'm just more happy for my teammates than I am like more happier that we disappointed somebody else. I don't really care about that at all. I mean, we have so many of our own supporters and, whether it be sponsors, families, friends, wives, kids, teammates, to worry about the people that like love us and want us to win, the people that didn't. I'm too old and past that. I think I used to care about that a lot. I'm just so happy to share it with the people that are happy too. And there's a lot of them. So no, I don't feel like that about any ex-teammates or any rivalries anymore. I mean, it's hard enough to win, and I think I played long enough that I've beat them all a shit ton of times, and they've whooped me a whole bunch of times. And at this point, it's just kind of like, is what it is. We're all trying to accomplish the same goal. And those are real teams. Mike, Reed, Brad, Matt, like those guys work hard. They work just as hard as we do.
Was there any team that jumped out at you at the Brier that maybe played a little bit better than you would have expected them to? Kind of a breakout Brier, for example?
Well, against us, when we played them, I said, well, they're making the playoffs for sure, was Kleider. They played us real tough. And I like their team, good kids. I'm biased because they're from Sasky, so I enjoy them and shoot the shit with them. But they played us real tough. And then they were brutal in other games. I'm like, come on, boys. Like, I thought for sure they were the third best team in our pool. Right. And was going to make a run with us and Mike, and then they kind of faltered and lost a couple of real bad games. Who actually they surprised? I don't even know what their final record was, but UConn with Thomas Scoffin and Carrot third, they weren't a free game.
Yeah, they went 4-4. UConn's best performance.
Were they 4-4?
Yeah, 4-4.
That's and they played that good. Like they looked like they could have upset a few teams. I know what a whole bunch of people were like, oh, the pools, and like we had the soft pool, and I'm like, has anybody watched the tour this year? Because Kleider, Moybrook, even Felix's team, they underwhelmed me a little bit because I know they got some talent in JM. I just think of him snaring the 06 Brier, and Martin Kret worked me at the juniors, and like they have an aura of them being good. They weren't good, but they could beat anybody at any time. They just have a team that, they could go out and make a lot of shots. But, and then honestly, I didn't see a lot of the other pool. I know Epdog got the raw end of the deal, going 6-2 and losing the wrong game, but looked like they were playing pretty good. I mean, that's the thing with the Brier. You just kind of got to make the playoffs and get hot for a couple days.
What were your thoughts on Nova Scotia?
Great guys. We like Owen there. He's a great guy. Their third's nice fella. I mean, I've known Scott Zachary for years. Owen looks like Megamind. Like he's got the Megamind. And I like him. Like he's a beauty. He's a great guy. And I mean, you can tell that they're a good team. He's young. I know he looks old as shit, but he's a young guy. So like he's gonna be around for a while. And he's the guy that I could cheer for sure. I think I voted for him for the sportsmanship actually.
Yeah. No, I know those guys from around here, obviously, but in the episode before the Brier, John and I talked about Team UConn and
Robbie's trying to pat himself on the back here.
Yeah, they were decent. Oh, I mean, and they made the playoffs.
Yeah.
So Van Muybrook and Kleider, I thought obviously were the three teams. Kleider for sure played us the toughest. I mean, Nova Scotia took us to the last rock in the playoff
whatever you call it, the 3-3 game or whatever. yeah.
What happened? Did they get us 2 stealing us in 9 or something?
That was a different.
That
was
was
the
the
league
game Brad
game.
picked. Yeah, I mean, I thought we bullied them even in that game pretty good. We had an open hit, like half open hit for 4, and it picked, and so we were 1 up coming home. But they hung in there, and I thought they did well. They probably finished as high as they could have.
Yep.
But they played really well. Yeah, they had a good showing.
I want to talk about the final because I think I was maybe a little surprised at Matt's approach to the final. Played pretty defensively and rather cautious. And I kind of thought with you guys having just come off of the semifinal, I might have tried to take the game to you a little earlier. But there was an interesting comment you made in the post-game interview where you said you felt like that was the only way they could have beaten you. So can you talk about both? Were you surprised that they played so defensively, and maybe elaborate on that comment a little bit, that was maybe the best way that they could have beat you?
Yeah, I didn't mean it from a strategy standpoint necessarily. I meant it more like controlling the brick, not losing it early. And, you get into those games and get the hammer flipped on you early. It's a big momentum thing. Matt didn't throw a guard till the 10th end.
Yes, I know.
I didn't think he was going that route, but I think that look at the strengths on their team. Ryan Harden was playing good. So he was setting them up. EJ and Colton, 2 of the best up the middle at throwing bombs. I think if we got into a soft game with them, with Brett and Mark, they probably don't like their chances. I wouldn't like their chances from what I've seen. And, Matt's got all the shots. So I think they played to their strengths. And, they could have easily won that game. So, I know people were, boring and 4 blank ends, but there was like 7 or 8 doubles in the first 4 ends. Like, we threw a guard every single end, run back double. Brad made 2 crosshouse doubles early, and we get the blanks. But I thought their strategy, it worked. They forced us in 6. Brad made a beauty on his last. I don't think Matt he couldn't have scored there. So Matt hit his last one in 7 perfect. Like, he thought it might squirt out, but I said, this is going straight down. It was impossible to make that shot. Hit it perfect, threw a good rock. That was a good momentum one for us. But as far as the strategy goes, I just feel like, they're a good enough team to get a deuce. You want to curl. 10 ends is just, you can't run and hide for 10 ends at high level curling. And they just, I've been there. We did that a little bit even. I remember in 2021 against Brendan, me and Johnny Moe and Cooey having a beer after the game. We were like, what are we doing? Like, we had the hammer, kind of take a little page out of the Bears playbook or the goo, control the board, don't get too crazy, tied up coming home, 1 down coming home. But then it bit us in 7. Kevin had a pick. They got 3, and then we had instant regrets of no rocks in play, and what were we doing? And I'm sure Matt will go back and probably look at that. But, Matt's a stud, and, he had a great week, and, he's going to win a Brier certainly soon. But, thankfully for us and our team, it wasn't Sunday. And we played it doesn't matter who we played an amazing 10th end. We had 8 perfectly placed stones. And when you have the hammer and you make 8 in a row, 2s and 3s normally pop up on the scorecard pretty easily. It's tough to defend. And we just played a really good 10th. Like I say, we were pretty calm and we were in the zone and we knew what we had to do. And I think a little bit of momentum in 9. I think if you go back, I don't know if Matt's picked or if he just threw a brick there, but on his flash in 9, if he noses it, we got a real good chance at a force. So that's okay. But if he rolled in like he wanted to roll in, he was going to have a chance at a blank. And that was a big miss for him. And then when we had him forced, I think the momentum switched, like I said, after that. And I think we were pretty confident on our side. We were getting that deuce in 10, and then it panned out. So I saw it.
I know you mentioned that you didn't have any beers all week, and you and Brett had some fun Sunday night, and then maybe one last night. I was in the other elite curling competition in Canada this weekend, the PEI Club Championship Provincials. We lost the final, so I might have had a few beers before I started watching the final. So anyway, I turned it on, and it was I think it was the 5th end, and it was 0-0, and I was just mind blowing. And then of course you hear all these, you go on Twitter and you read all these blank comments. What are your thoughts on that? Because my honest opinion is There's such thing as a boring blank, and then there's such thing as not a boring blank. If there's 8 rocks frozen above the tee line and 3 rocks later it's empty, that's called skill. That's my opinion. Talk about that, because I know the teams are getting shit on a lot for not making it more exciting and all that. What are your thoughts?
Well, we threw a guard every end.
Yeah.
And like I say, Matt's game plan, like I knew what he was trying to do. Like they were executing their game plan. They had the hammer and it was tied. That's always a good spot to be in a big championship game. Like they probably felt comfortable in that situation. And I know on our side, we're like, hey, we got to flip this brick eventually. We flip it after 9. But hey, on our side, you'd love to flip it after 5 or 6. I'm not gonna, or 3. But, it wasn't like super comforting knowing we were running out of ends. But the blank situation, I mean, I don't know. I liked what we did at the slams there, even to try you have to score after 1. That was unique. To bring that into 10 end curling, maybe. The time clock is an issue if you're going to throw double centers and corners everything. Like it is tight.
Yep.
You got a wheel. So in the 10 end game, they're pretty much saying like run them up and down for 2 ends to keep your clock good so that we can give some real good entertainment to the fans for the other 8 ends. So that's a little bit tough. As far as the blank goes of a boring end or a not boring end, depends what the skips want to do. I mean, there was a million good doubles in that game, but I mean, blanks are boring for the players too. Don't kid yourself. I like to be in there when there's action and there's a chance at a steal or a deuce, but it's entertainment. I mean, at the end of the day, it's entertainment, but you're trying to win as a team. And if you got a blank and end to save some time, I think Matt made he'll probably look back. He probably should have thrown a guard in the 8th end. That was a beautiful blank for us. When we threw it in, thinking like, okay, he's go corner, we'll go in and then we'll throw a guard. And when he hit it, we were all kind of just looking at each other like, oh, okay. So that was, probably a strategic mistake by him. And he doesn't make a lot of those. He'll probably, look back at that one and want to discuss it with his team for the future. But, we're comfortable with 1 hammer each, force deuce to win. And that's what we got.
Let's talk about you brought them up already. Your kids, more specifically your son, became a bit of a story in the wake of the Brier celebration.
He's ripped.
He's ripped.
Man.
He is ripped. Did you know that there was a plan for him to go tarps off in the final there?
No, but there's a big story behind it. Like in 08 when we won, my brother Critter and my cousin Adam, they showed up to our 08 final game in Winnipeg, painted yellow and blue chest. And they were, this is a long time ago, they were pretty ripped too. So they're jacked up. So my son has seen these pictures of my brother, his uncle, and his other uncle, because my other cousin's like my brother too. And they're painted up. And at the Olympics in Vancouver, I got great pics. All my cousins, and they were all like pretty chiseled back in the day until they got into the Pines. And they were all painted up. Canada gear and Hebert and logos. They did full chest paint. And so my son had seen these and he's like, Dad, I want to do that. And I'm like, I'm curling. Just leave me alone. And we get there and I don't see him. Like I didn't see him until, I don't think I even seen him. First time I saw it, it was on the Jumbotron in like 7. I saw him up there flexing the guns and he had his little abs painted in. And I mean, he is cut. Hey, if I looked like him, I wouldn't wear, you guys think I'd wear a shirt? I'd be tarps off all the time. So he's 7 years old, loving his life. I told my wife I got off the ice. I had 411 text messages. I was looking at my phone, and I bet you half of them talked about my son Griff being a stallion in the Kentucky. Like, congrats, Griff's the man. Griff stole the show, and I'm like, oh man, what a beauty. But no, I was proud. I was a proud dad. He's a great kid.
Is he the second born?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, my daughter's not allowed to go tarps off.
No.
We're not running that program around here, boys.
I know another second born who would probably rip the tarp off and
there you go.
Dabs on, but
yeah,
anyway, he lives in PEI. John, I'm going to let you ask this one, but anything else happen at the Brier, like behind the scenes, anything fun? John, you want to jump in?
Well, I mean, I heard, I did hear a story, Ben, you probably know, I do a little research, before I have my guests on the show. And, I heard that, perhaps there was an incident, involving a vehicle, at the Brier. You maybe got your teammate's truck in a little bit of a dust up. Can you tell us about that?
Tight parking lot, very tight parking lot at the Delta Grand Kelowna. I was going to get my shirt altered because like great shirts, by the way. I will, props to Gold Line, very nice material, but like 3/4 length baseball shirts. I'm like, I don't have that many good qualities on my body. They need to breathe. They need to breathe. So I went to get them height. So I'm going to get them altered on like Thursday morning. I'm like, Mark, I need your keys. So he throws me his keys. I'm wheeling out of the parking lot. And I'm just kind of like, it's slow. Like it's a tight little parking lot. All of a sudden I hear, and I'm like, what just happened? I look over at this guy. We're like eye to eye. I'm like, did you just hit me? He goes, no, you hit me. I'm like, I think you hit me. So anyways, we go out. I give him my ID. I'm rattled because I crashed Mark's truck, not mine. Worked out. I told the guy, here's my license. Give me a call after. I'm busy for the next 10 days. I told Mark yesterday, take it to the body shop. Tell me how much it is. I'll email you. And then I said, unless it's too much, don't email me or something like that. It was a minor detail. Mark took it like a champ. I mean, hey, it's a driving force truck. It's a sponsored truck.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It wasn't a dent. It's a little scratch right on his name.
Yeah, that's what he told me. The name got scratched out.
And in the end, I got him the truck so he can.
Did the other guy know who you were? Like, were you like, I'm at the Brier, or at least know like what the Brier was? You're like, I'm curling.
Not a curling guy. No.
Okay.
He was just rattled that we scratched vehicles. Tough way to start the Brier.
Hey, but you had a good way of ending it. So
right.
Congratulations again, Ben. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking some time. I know the glow hasn't worn off yet, but best of luck at the Worlds as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good luck,
guys.
Ben.
Thanks, boys.
There you have it. Always great to hear from Ben and Robbie. Dare I say, Ben seeming quite lucid this morning. That was like I feel like that was maybe the most serious mode Ben I've ever interviewed. He was very introspective and it was a great interview.
I think Ben, and rightfully so, is emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted. And I can definitely give him, he's got the pass on that. Absolutely well deserved. No, he had some great insight though. It's cool to kind of, have a chat like that with somebody, especially, when they're pretty much still in the moment. I don't think the Brier's been over for 48 hours or just about. So pretty cool. And he's pretty proud. I couldn't help but notice that trophy in the background.
Yeah, no, it was great to chat to him. And now we are going to move on to the coach, Paul Webster, his first Brier title as a coach. Maybe a bit of a surprising fact to learn, given how much success he had with the national team program over the years. But first Brier win as a coach. Let's go there now. All right, great chat with Ben Hebert. And you know what? You start with the lead and you go right to the top. We are now pleased to be joined by coach of Team Brad Jacobs, Paul Webster. Paul, congratulations, of course. Amazing win at the Brier. Your first Brier win, which is also exciting. We'll get to that in a minute. But I want to go back to the beginning with you because this is sort of an interesting scenario. You were working with Curling Canada for a long time and then, got approached to coach the new team Botcher, decided to leave, got into the business of coaching an individual team. Can you walk me through that process? Were you looking to leave Curling Canada and this kind of fell into your lap at the right time, or was it just the team that made you want to leave? Or can you because I feel like a lot of the fans maybe don't know how this all kind of came together.
Yeah, I mean, if you can look at the jacket, Ben's a pretty good salesman. Right? So Benny and I have gone back since 2005. So I started working with Curling Canada in 2004, left teaching in Ontario to come here and do my level 4 coaching at the U of C, and just never left. I got invited to be part of our Olympic coaching staff for the 2006 Olympics. And then I've been in Calgary ever since. Benny and I went with Pat Simmons to Karazawa in 2005 or 6. I can't remember the actual year, but I've known that guy for a long time. And, after the last quad, Beijing Olympics, I was Olympic team leader for that. That was my 5th Olympics involved with Curling Canada. And I wouldn't say I was looking for a change, but when Benny approached, say, listen, we're putting this team together and would you consider coaching us? So, I sat and talked to my wife, Jen, and and just said, listen, it wasn't like there wasn't anything left with the national coach job, but this is just a really new challenge. And it was funny, talking to some of our club members here at the Glencoe Club last night. They're like, well, how many Briers is that for you now? I'm like, that's my first. And that was only my, like, when our first year coaching with Brendan back in London, that was my first Brier coaching. I'd been to multiple worlds and Olympics and stuff, but had never coached at a national championship, funny enough. And off I went. So I was brand new to that world, and super, just a whole different realm of coaching. I talked to a couple of reporters in the Brier, and you jump on with the Curling Canada thing. You jump on the gravy train and the excitement of Team Canada. You show up the weekend of the Brier. It's fun, and off to the Worlds, and you're really you're taking a team that's working on all cylinders and having one of their best events to the next event. So there's not too much exhaustion or stress there. But having been in the trenches with these guys, three of them now for 3 seasons, and this whole team for this season, man, is that win ever such a big accomplishment. I don't want to say relief, because we were expecting to win the Brier. That's our goal. And but it like, I was just exhausted at the end of the week, and going in and out of the practice ice and so on with these guys. They deserve that win.
Yeah, obviously the team, the team made a lineup change, obviously early on or in the off season. I'm going to let John jump in on that in a moment. But my question is, and I asked the same thing to Ben. I interviewed him at the Slam in Nisku, and I asked about just a little bit of a state of the union at the time. I believe this was I think early November, so closer to the start of the year. And he said you guys weren't where you wanted to be, but it takes time. You have a plan in place, and you're trying to be as patient as you can and let it all work out. It's been 2 Slam finals. Now you won the Brier. Are you where you want to be?
I think so. Not that I think so. Yeah, absolutely. We knew we had the lineup right. We, with the change in skip, you're bringing in a proven winner. But then you have to create that team dynamic, and the relationships in those high pressure moments are so important. And it takes time to develop those, and it takes time to enhance and refine those relationships, so you can perform in the moments like the Brier final. And I know there's still percentage points on the board for these guys, um, and I'm hoping to see those at the World Championships. But again, our goal when we put this team together last May was basically to peak for the Olympic trials and then go to Italy and get on the podium for Canada. So this is just a really great win along the way. And I like the skip we have right now in terms of his history of winning the Brier the year before the Olympics. And I want to put I was there in 2013 with him in BC, funny enough, in Victoria, when we had the World Championships, and I'd love to head off to another Olympics with Brad and get on the podium.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that was the biggest news of the curling offseason. Obviously, there were a lot of changes, but probably none bigger than the decision to move on from Brendan Bottcher and pick up Brad Jacobs. I've said this on pods before. There was a time last year where you were the number one team in the world. So you're talking about taking the number one skip in the world off of the team. Were you involved in that decision at all? I know you're very ingrained with the guys. I'm sure, there are some coaches where their level of involvement is kind of, they come to some tournaments, but not all of them, whatever. Like, you are very much ingrained in this team, a part of this team. Were you involved in that decision at all, or was it more kind of brought to you and you were asked your opinion? Did your opinion matter? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I got a call at the end of the Players Championship, and the boys like, this is what we're thinking. These are the options on the table, and it was funny when they set it all out. I'm like, guys, it actually makes sense to me. I understand what you're in. Benny's like, oh, I thought you're going to be the sort of the voice of reason. Um, they have a ton of respect for Brendan Bottcher, as do I. Brendan's a really good friend. I think he's still one of our top young skips in the game. Um, you know, they knew it was tough. I think had Brendan not been the person he is, it would have been an easy decision. But man, they spent a long time making sure the decision was made properly with respect to Brendan and what he brings to the table. And you know, you go back to sport. If there's any other sport, we're not talking about trading a first line center for a first line center, and what a big deal it is. You're just trying to win. You know, the Toronto Maple Leafs asked Mitch Marner to put his no trade clause up at the deadline, and they're trying to get Mikko Rantanen. And I was like, wow, that would be pretty cool to see that mix. We just did the same thing, and we took a first line center and trade him for a first line center. And Brad Jacobs was there last year playing really well. He wanted to sort of get onto a different team and increase his chances of winning. And yeah, I think it's shown this year the different levels of intensity. I just got a great text from John Morse this morning, just saying, "Wow, it was really cool to see the guys playing like I feel they should." And they just looked more comfortable. And chemistry's a weird thing with teams like that. Like you need in a curling team, you need four individuals that can perform with each other. 100% of the time we're given 25%, and it's super important that those relationships work and you feel like you can perform. And, the last 2 years with Brendan, you nailed it. Like we did really, really well, and there was just that sort of feeling in the background for the guys that they weren't going to achieve what they wanted to in the next 2 years. So they made a trade, and I respect them for that. It's the easier decision was to go status quo and not change. It would have been everyone would have understood it. So they had to answer more questions, and it was way more stressful to make that change and to make that phone call to Brendan and meet up with him and just say, listen, it wasn't going in the direction we wanted it to or felt it was going to. And then I think that win at the Brier, you could see there's part of relief for sure. Like we made the right decision, and I don't have any qualms that Brendan Botcher's going to win multiple more Briers. But for Brad Jacobs and Ben Hebert and Brett Gallant and Mark Kennedy right now, this is the time they wanted to win one.
What were some of the qualities you were looking for or looking to get out of Brad Jacobs when he joined the team? Is there anything in particular like the team just felt we were missing and this guy can bring it to us?
Well, I don't know. I can't remember if you guys have had Brendan on the show, but you've had Brad recently.
He had Brendan too. We had both of them actually. Yeah.
So they're completely different people.
Right.
You are just getting, yeah. I think my kids might watch this, so not
Sorry.
that they don't always swear, but yeah, no, it's all good. No, you guys swear away.
No,
Fucking right is right. But it's a completely different dynamic. And again, partly when you get that dynamic, there is a concern there. There's a worry about whether that will work. When you see that celebration. When they won that Brier championship, there's 10 years of release with Brad Jacobs. There's 6 years for Ben and Mark, wherever that was, I can't remember. Brett left the reigning Brier champs to join this team and move to Alberta. And you just saw the chemistry. The chemistry is just it's just a different team, and so there was a huge risk in changing your skip in reference to get that. But there's also what that we just saw. There was huge reward as well, and we're not done. So we've got 3 weeks until we're off to Moose Jaw, and then winning the Brier was one of those pieces of the puzzle we wanted along this 2-year cycle with the team to give us the best chance to win the Olympic trials.
I want to talk about Brad specifically. I think a lot of what we hear from the rest of the team, we hear leadership, we hear chemistry, but those are kind of nebulous terms. I mean, you're the coach of the team. You maybe have the best view of this of anyone. Can you be a little more specific about what Brad has brought to the team? Like when we say things like leadership and we say things like chemistry, what does that mean? What does that look like exactly?
His biggest thing is he wants to win games for his guys. He was really intent at the start when he joined this team to make sure he got to know his new players, their families, what makes them tick, Those questions continually come out in team calls, just checking in on people. I know he's behind the scenes doing the same thing one-on-one. And then he's very old. I've been around a lot of championship teams, and I find skips all have different qualities and so on, but most of them are they're often their own little islands because they're so good at making last shots, and they have different qualities that the most of us, myself included, just can't connect with. And that's what makes them great, is they're just, they have their own ways of winning and so on. I think what's interesting about Brad, you saw that one shot against Reed Crothers where we're peeling a guard and he pretty much noses it in a Brier playoff game. A lot of skips, we would find reasons for why that happened, and it would include their name. Brad's like, boys, I fucking broke my wrist. Like
Yeah.
so you're not dancing
Eating the
around.
chickens.
You're not dancing around.
Yep.
Yeah, you're not dancing around it, and so that human quality with him is just, you're able to leave that game, which we won, but you're also able to move into the next end, and that acknowledgement and ownership of his mistake is just there. So there's no dancing around it, and sometimes, depending on the skip and so on, you've got to create a false sense of reality to ensure we have a chance to make the next shot or get the next win. And with Brad, it's like, yeah, no, you did, and off we go. I really respect that about him, and it's he's an easy athlete to coach that in that way. He's super open to input from all of his teammates, his coach included. And you have to be careful what you say, because he'll make it his own. And if you say this is what we need to do to improve or win, he's a 100% in.
I'm kind of having one of those aha moments just based on around a few things that you've said in this interview, things that we've all known, but I guess when you hear it from the horse's mouth, it's like, wow, like Brett Gallant left the reigning Brier champions. I never thought of it like that before. Moved across the country to play with this team. You made that skipping change where you got rid of one player and brought in someone who had to leave their team. There's been a lot of sacrifice made to be where you are right now. The reigning Brier champions, getting ready for the Worlds, the Olympics 1 year away. Is there anything else, in your opinion, as the coach, that needs to be done? Or is there any change? I don't want to say changes, but any really, I guess what I'm saying is, do you feel like you're good enough right now to go get that gold medal at the Worlds and win the trials next year? Or is there still some work to be done?
I absolutely believe we have the chance to win a gold medal at the Worlds this year. I think the Olympics is going to be tougher because all those same teams that already know they're going to the Olympics next year are also trying to get better. So do I believe this version of Team Jacobs right now has the ability to win a gold medal at the Olympics next year? No, I don't. I actually think we need to get better. However, I know I've got 4 guys that also understand they need to get better. So we're trying to find those half percentage points. Our best games at the Brier this last event would definitely win the Olympics for us. The interesting thing is we've got to string together about 10 or 12 of those in a row, and that's well, it's going to be a crazy event, and that's the difference. With the Olympics is everyone's peaking at the same time. Canada does it a little bit differently. I actually really respect the way we have and the depth we have. But Bruce Mowat knows he's off to the Olympics next year, so he's preparing for that right now. I haven't, if you listen to my focus, we want to win the Olympic trials, and then it's not like we're forgetting that the Olympics are there. But that's a huge hurdle in the way of the Olympics. And guys like Brad Gushu and Matt Dunstone and Reed Crothers and Kevin Cooey are all going to say we're doing the same thing. So we've got to string together those 10, 11, 12 games at the Olympic trials. And whatever team wins that Olympic trials, and I 100% believe it's going to be us, is going to be ready to win a gold medal for Canada.
I want to ask you a bit about the modern coach in curling, because I think the curling fan maybe doesn't necessarily know what you're doing per se, and like I said, I think there's different ways of attacking coaching, right? Like there's a few teams like Kevin Cooey and Matt Dunstone where their coach is more like a sports psychologist. Or in Matt Dunstone's case, also as Caleb Flaxey, who we know is a good curling coach, but it's also very analytics driven with him. He's a stats guy, and then there's other teams that kind of just bring on a coach for the Brier because they go, hey, well, we got to bring someone, and you're there at almost every event. And so I'm curious, what is your role with Team Jacobs, and what would you say is sort of like, in your mind, the role of a modern curling coach in general? Because I think there are probably people who don't exactly know what it is that you're doing with the team on sort of a day-to-day, week-to-week basis.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think every team has a different need. My strength has always been in the technical area for sure. I think I'm one of the best technical coaches out there. Like if you've got a concern with your curling delivery, or you simply want to improve and make more shots, I have 100% confidence I can do that at a pretty high level. So that was one thing when Ben grabbed me. He's like, we just don't want anyone to have access to you. So that's one of the reasons he wanted me, is we don't want you helping other teams get better. The one thing I love doing with these guys as adult males is just getting them to talk. So we work a ton on just communication, and I think they get frustrated that they'll share something with me about one of their teammates, and I say probably 25 times an event, well, have you said that to him? And they're like, oh, Webby, yeah, okay, I will. And then they get it, right? But those relationships that they need to improve and get better, and pushing guys to communicate, and their partners at home will back me up on this one. It's not easy sometimes, and that's where I've loved watching their relationships get stronger. And we had some great conversations at the Brier after tricky wins and easy wins. But one of the highlights for me was when Mark Kennedy said to Brett, like, listen, I just want to acknowledge your energy on the ice this past game was amazing. Like, unbelievable teammate. It ensured I had the ability to throw 90-95. And that's what we're acknowledging. I watch a lot of athletes out there, male and female, and it is fascinating to watch their reactions, their body language, and what they say on a sheet of curling ice in pressure-filled moments that is just so horribly ugly to watch. And then their teammate's supposed to perform despite that. So I've called, part of my job, I believe, is to call their bullshit a lot of times. Like, listen, when you said or did that, were you actually expecting that to help your teammate? And they're like, their answer has to be no. We joke around a lot of times, and I can't remember who I stole this from, is out there, we've got options in life when we're performing in a team, and we can be -1s and detract from your performance. We can be zeros and just be neutral, or we can be a +1. So one of our adages on our team is just be a +1. At the very least, be a 0. But man, when you say that out loud, today, you know what? I'm not feeling great. So at the very least, I'm going to be a 0 today. Well, Jesus Christ. It's hard not to then say, what am I doing? I might as well be a +1, right? Like if my goal today is just to be a 0, and, I'll throw my 90, but, the other 3 guys, good luck. So, that part, we've had temper tantrums out there. We've had guys frustrated, but their ability to move on. Brad, as you know, is just every once in a while he'll just say random shit. And today, before a game, we'll go around and say, okay, what are we focusing on this? And we go around, and everyone's got some pieces that we've been focusing on and want to make sure we're doing for this game. And I think it was the first playoff game, or maybe the second, and Brad's just like, Canada Goose. And we're overlooking the lake in Kelowna. I'm like, is there just a goose out there that he saw? He goes, no, I want to play loose as a goose. Right. And so then that became, but for the guys, they're like, great. So there's a few moments in the next 2 or 3 games where it was stressful, and we're just like, honk. And we're like, oh yeah. Right. And then everyone's like, oh yeah, honk. And then there's like, Anaheim Mighty Ducks movie. Like, we want to have the flying V, and but that ability to just enjoy those moments, so that even that side was, instead of being really focused on psychology and so on, that ability is like, yeah, we're supposed to be loose, and just ensuring we all want to make the shots, they all want to play 95, but there's going to be games when they don't, and when they don't bring their own individual performance, I expect them to focus on their teammates' performance, because they have such an ability to enhance that performance. More importantly, if they have an ability to detract from that performance, and that's what we want to get away from.
Last question from me, Paul. I just want to say this was a really cool interview. It's really cool to hear from a coach's perspective. We've never really done this before, and I just really enjoyed the answers. I feel like I learned a lot. And speaking of learning a lot, you were kind of at least in Canada, kind of the first real full-time curling coach. You left your like a job with Curling Canada to really focus on this one team. And I think it's just the start of many. I think as the game improves, it's just going to be needed to get to that top level. And I'm just thinking of someone who lives here. He's a young, kind of hungry guy, wants to get into coaching more seriously. And he's a big fan of yours, actually. His name's Lincoln. And anyway, if you could I just think of him when I ask you this. If you could give a piece of advice to someone like that who says, you know what, I tried curling, I love the game, I don't think I want to play, but there's something about coaching that really attracts me. What advice would you give them?
I would say get out and get involved. I mean, my sort of mentors and stuff in the game were Jim Waite and Jerry Peckham. I met Jim at a really young age. I was 18. The first Trillium curling camp was in my hometown of Peterborough. And then we had won the juniors that year and went off to Canadians, and Jim invited me to be part of the staff there. So I got to work, in almost like, that wasn't, oh man, that's a long time ago. Like 95, 96, but I probably worked 18 straight summers at the Trillium curling camp and whitecap curling camps and 4-foot curling camps with Elaine Dag Jackson. But then all the coaches you can imagine that I've been able to work with throughout that, Keith Wendorf and Ron Myers and Wayne Kyle, Andrea Ronnebeck, Jen Ferris. There's honestly, I could give you a list of what I think are the top 50 coaches in the world. And I've had the, the ability and opportunity to work with them and learn from them. So that, that ability to get out there and work and just volunteer with, you have to do a lot of free work in curling before you can get paid, sadly. So getting out there and just learning how to take a slide and fix it. There's so many times when I go back and the stuff that I would have said in my 20s to someone to fix their slide, man, I probably ruined them. Right? There's probably people not curling because I'm like, oh, try this. But now, after looking at,
They're on their
thousands
second
of
knee.
deliveries, man. Yeah, totally. Oh, yeah. Of course, I don't hear from them because they're not playing. But now it's really cool when you're able to take someone like, Brett and I had a epiphany this year with a little technical thing of his, and it just worked. So, working with someone of that caliber to help them increase their game, and their the way we practice, I think, is the best in Canada in terms of individual and team practices. And, Brad wasn't too sure what we were up to when I tried to describe to what we work on, how we practice in April, May. But now that he's bought in, he believes he's throwing the rock better than he ever has. And you can just see it, so it's not the games where you go out and throw 95. It's those consistent games where we're trying to make sure their lowest level is at 85. And bringing up that basement, as opposed to they've always seen the peaks and so on, but it's that consistency. But going back to your buddy in PI, just get out there, ask questions. Most curling clubs are looking for people. There's new association of curling pros out there that Rob Krebs is heading up with Curling Canada. That ability now to become an accredited pro would be something I would look into as well.
Very cool. And just tell the boys that, going back to the Mighty Ducks conversation, I actually curled a game with Gunnar Stahl, who was the captain for Team Iceland in the second one. Curling runs deep in the Mighty Ducks.
Yeah.
Honk. Okay, last one from me, Paul. I think, with you guys going to the Worlds now, you talked about how many times you've been to the Worlds as part of the Curling Canada team program and kind of meeting a team where they're at after they win the Scotties or the Brier or win the Olympic trials. Now you're in the program, you're with this team. How has it looked different? How do you think it's going to look different now that you're like the guy that's going to Worlds with a team as opposed to Curling Canada's guy that's going to the Worlds with a team?
It's a completely different experience. Like I think you feel you've earned, not, I actually feel I've earned it. Right. So you're there in the trenches, and this is what we talk about it all the time. Before I knew I was going to the World Championships. So it was blocked off in the schedule. It's all good. I think my wife did. My wife is a full-time surgeon. Her job is crazy. She makes me super proud of her on a regular basis in terms of the life she changes. She doesn't really watch curling. I think it was just a few months ago. She goes, "So you might not go to the Olympics then this time." Like it just clicked. I'm like, no, like we have to win for me to go. She goes, "Oh, so that decision to leave Curling Canada, that was a pretty big one," right? I'm like, it was massive, right? But man, if we, like, having been there with these boys to win that Brier, it's a completely different role. And I think, to be brutally honest, I'm not sure if I had as much respect as I should have for those team coaches in the past. I don't want to apologize because I think there was just not that. It was just pure ignorance and as innocent as it can be, having not been in that type of role. And I think everyone should have an opportunity to coach a team, a Scotties or a Brier, because man, when that win, like I have never been so exhausted and relieved and happy over a win. And I've been there at Olympics with multiple gold medals being won and so on. And you're relieved for the athlete. I was relieved for myself. Like, and that, there's so much stress on the decisions you made. And even that final game, we were tiptoeing around some strategy stuff, and Brad, like I said, he is open to input. And when he looks at you and goes, "Do you like this?" And then I'm like, "Oh man, yes." And because it's going to be listened to. So our, the decision go into the house in the eighth end. He wants everyone on board. So if I was to say no at that moment, he probably would not have done that. Everyone's on board, and when that works out, you're like, oh, like that is what a game to be a part of. I think I'm super humbled to be part of this team with the resumes that they have. But I'm super excited that we just add another line to these guys' resumes. Brad deserved another Brier, as did Mark, Brett, and Ben. The amount that these guys work and how hard and talented they are, it's, I hope this is just one of many wins that's going to come for this team.
Love it. Well, thank you, Paul. Congratulations again. Your first Brier win. What a feeling. Hopefully that keeps going at the Worlds. But yeah, this was a great chat. I know the fans will love it, and we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much, guys.
Congrats, Webby. Cheers.
All right. Thank you so much to Paul and to Ben. As you said, Robbie, less than 48 hours after their Brier win, as we're recording this on Tuesday morning, really appreciate both of them taking the time and just both having, a great perspective on the win already. Sometimes this quick of a turnaround, you don't necessarily have the wherewithal to put it into words, but I thought those were two great interviews. Awesome to hear from both of those guys.
Good interviews and different interviews. That's what I liked about them. It was really cool to hear it from a coach's perspective. And Paul was, he'll go in the history books as sort of a pioneer, as somebody who was pretty much the first, I think, and I don't know the details about payment or anything like that, but he left a job, joined one team, and he's their coach. So, I would say probably the first true professional team coach in the game. And just to kind of hear that from him was really cool. I know I'm going to be corrected on that by people, but
no, yeah, it was awesome. I loved having Paul on the show. Been a big fan of his and a friend. He brought up 4-foot curling camp. That was when I first met Paul. I was a counselor at 4-foot in 2004. And that was the first time I met Paul, and we've been friends ever since. Great guy. Not surprising to see him have success as a coach. Now, Robbie, this has been a jam-packed episode of the show. 2 interviews that went long. We had to get our Brier recap in. So normally we play a game here, but I have a little bit of a different twist this week. The game is you have to sign off the podcast and then we're leaving.
Okay, well, hope you enjoyed yourself, ladies and gentlemen. There you heard it. Brier champions, Ben Hebert, Coach Paul Webster joining us. What a couple weeks of curling it's been. The Scotties, little week off, then the Brier Women's World's coming up. It's a good time to be a fan. For my good friend, John Cullen, I'm Robbie Doherty. We'll see you next time on the Broom Brothers.
That's the man right there. Hey, that was really good. That was really good. Follow us everywhere on Broom Brothers. And if you want to see the video of this episode, it is up on our YouTube, and we will see you back here in a couple weeks. Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, everyone. Bye.